France is to bring back a form of military service. That comes weeks after Germany announced plans to assess young people's suitability for military duty. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has forced European states to examine their readiness. So could conscription return? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Dareen Abughaida. France has announced the return of military service 25 years after ending conscription. The plan is voluntary this time, limited to 10 months of duty and only on French soil. But the issue has sparked strong debate in the country, for and against, with President Macron saying the country needed to be prepared to mobilize. Last month, Germany revealed plans that all 18-year-old men must declare their fitness to serve and be medically screened from 2027. In the UK, the Conservative Party proposed mandatory military or community service in its manifesto for an election last year that it lost. European military strength and readiness is under much greater scrutiny since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 4 years ago and since U.S. President Donald Trump's re-election. So could military service and even conscription become reality again in European countries? What are the arguments for and against? And are such measures really needed? We'll ask our guests shortly, but first this report from Alexandra Byers.
More than 25 years after France ended mandatory conscription, military service is back. But this time, it's voluntary. President Emmanuel Macron announced the plan on Thursday.
This is a major asset on the military, moral, civic and republican front. This is an act of trust on our youth.
Beginning next year, 18 and 19-year-old men and women will be able to volunteer for 10 months of paid military training. There will be space for 3,000 people the first year, but there are ambitions to expand it to 50,000 by 2035.
In this world that's uncertain, where force rules over law, war is a present-day reality. Our nation could not afford fear, panic, lack of preparedness or division. And fear never prevents danger. The only way to prevent it is to prepare for it.
The head of the French armed forces recently caused controversy and alarm when he said French military planning was built around the assumption of a confrontation with Russia in the next 3 to 4 years.
If our country falters because it's not ready to accept the loss of its children, because let's face it, these things need to be said, or ready to suffer economically because priorities will shift to defense, then we are at risk.
The move by France reflects a broader shift across Europe, where governments are bolstering their defenses over growing fears of a Russian threat. Nearly a dozen other nations have launched similar projects. Belgium and the Netherlands have introduced voluntary military service, and Germany is planning something similar. Lithuania and Latvia have compulsory schemes, with cadets chosen by lottery. Sweden has started 9 to 15 months of military service, with selection being on merit, while some countries, like Finland and Greece, have never stopped. But there are others, like the UK and Spain, who have no plans to reintroduce it. Back in Paris, reaction was mixed.
My ancestors fought for this country. That's why I live here. They went to war. We must make them proud. And frankly, if we were suddenly faced with having to go to war, I would go.
We know that training a soldier capable of fighting in today's world with highly sophisticated weapons takes time and money. So I think it's a first step, but in reality we should increase the Army's budget and develop other types of weaponry, rather than necessarily relying on young people who may not be the most suitable for the task.
Military experts differ on conscription and its effectiveness. Some saying Europe must force more people to join the ranks, while others say volunteers make better soldiers. But But that the issue is being discussed at all is a sign of a changed security climate in Europe. Alexandra Byers, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's now bring in our guests. From Saint-Malo, Jacques Reland, who's a senior research fellow in European affairs, focusing on French politics, European defence and wider EU institutions. From London, Paul Beaver, a former soldier and defence analyst with experience assessing trends in European armed forces and recruitment. From Havide in Denmark, we're joined by Peter Nielsen, who's a former commander of NATO's Force Integration Unit in Lithuania, a retired Danish Army colonel and specialist in Nordic defence and NATO readiness. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for your time. And it is with you, Peter, that we will begin this program. So, as we know, Europe is revisiting this idea of military service. From your NATO experience, is the shift being driven more by real security needs, deterrence, readiness, so on and so forth, or is it simply political posturing?
Well, I think it's a combination. We, of course, want to deter Russia from doing anything against the NATO countries. But in case if that deterrence will fail, then we must be able to defend ourselves. And the ultimate deterrence is, of course, to show our enemy that we are capable of defending ourselves. Because if we are not doing that, then it's just a masquerade, and there's no really buck for the money behind all the facade. So I think this is very important. But we also need to remember that deterrence is not the success of deterrence is not determined by us. The success of deterrence is determined by the enemy. So if it stands, then the enemy will not attack, of course, but that's outside our decision. The enemy, of course, always Russia here will be looking at does he have the capabilities, does he have the will, and is there an opportunity to attack? And then this is where it gets concerning for us.
Paul Beaver, you've argued that willingness to serve drops the further a country is from Russia, right? In this example. Given that, how viable then are Europe's new voluntary first schemes? And do you think young people are willing to enlist in large numbers?
Well, you've touched on a very complex subject there, and it's really about the willingness. If you look at the United Kingdom, the number of young people who are disinterested in international affairs or the defense of their country, they're more interested in spending time looking at their social media. You only have to walk along the streets of London and be knocked into by somebody who is head down on a mobile phone listening to something on Instagram or something similar. And that's a real issue. In the United Kingdom, we've got I think a mega problem, and that is that we have traditionally had a large and capable navy, but that navy tends to spend a lot of time at sea, because it's a navy, at least 300 days a year. So that's 300 days you're out of bed. Whether you're a man or a woman in the professional navy, that's becoming a problem because spouses, be they male or female, are complaining about that. Nuclear submarine crews routinely spend 300 days in a year at sea. So that's a problem. How do you get people to come and do that? How do you get people to join the armed forces in Britain when they're going to be paid 3 times less than a person driving a tube train in the London Underground who only actually has to work 4 days a week? So you've got all of these social pressures. I don't think conscription will work in Britain. It's just we don't have a social background for it like our Scandinavian colleagues. My Norwegian colleagues, for example, will tell you that it's quite normal. Everybody knows what they have to do in the Home Guard. Most people keep a rifle at home. The Finns, for example, who've never, as you said in your report, got ever done away with conscription, they can all ski, they all know the countryside they're in, and they are formidable at doing that. The regular armed forces in Britain, I don't think would welcome conscription because we don't have enough training places for it. This is the big argument against the Conservative Party's manifesto pledge.
Okay, we're going to drill down into Britain in just a moment, but first let me bring in Jacques Reland, because Jacques, you describe European societies as only at the beginning of a long transition towards accepting mobilization again. To you, what does that transition look like?
The transition will be gradual, but like, for example, Macron's announcement yesterday of this military service on a voluntary basis is the latest chapter in a campaign which has been lasting for quite a while in France to prepare the French population to the possibility of a war with Russia. Not necessarily a war involving soldiers on the ground, but already saying that this war can take many forms, and we've seen it already. Cyber attacks against the transport system, trying to create unrest in the population by having campaign against, organized by Russia, targeting Jews or Muslims, whatever brings conflict. So we know that the French are aware that Russia is an enemy of France. But it's not necessarily means that we can go to war on the ground, to war with Russia. That's not the view. The idea is to prepare the population to this possibility.
But Jacques, President Macron insists that his model is not conscription, right? But he admits it could become mandatory in a crisis. So from your reading of French politics and what Macron has been saying, is this essentially conscription waiting in the wings?
Not yet. I think it's not on the cards yet. It could become it could become a possibility if really the situation deteriorated, if really Russia attacked, for example, the Baltic republics, and if Europe needed to really come to the rescue of Ukraine, or if Europe is threatened. But let's not forget that we also have the nuclear weapon, the nuclear deterrent, and I don't think the population is ready yet for conscription of all the young people at this stage. They're totally in favor of this new system, that's for sure. 80% of people approve this idea of training people for military duties with a basic military training plus a specialization in some area. That's definitely the case. And most people are aware also of the need that it would help to boost the reserve forces of France. At the moment, there's only about 50,000 reserve soldiers in France, reserve officers. And that would allow the number. The aim is to double that number.
Okay. Peter Nielsen, just focusing on France for just a little bit more. General Mandon said France must be ready to, quote, lose its children, right? Was the French general speaking a necessary truth about societal readiness, or do you think he was out of line?
No, I think our politicians need to prepare our societies for conflict. There has been, unfortunately, a lacking factor in this because Ukraine now is buying time for the rest of Europe to prepare our defense, and we need our politicians to talk straight to the population so that they see the picture. And I mean, the Baltic states, now I've been living in Lithuania I'm from the Nordic country Denmark myself, but I've been living in Lithuania for 4.5 years. So these people from the Baltic countries have been speaking about the threat for many years, even prior to the first Russian invasion of Ukraine, but we didn't really listen. And it seems like they're still listening, still not listening. So we need to continue with our politicians to press this message through, that it's serious. NATO has changed from a deterrence doctrine to a concept of defense and deterrence. So this needs to be told, and we need to prepare our society for a potential conflict. I think we can compare with the Cold War situation, where I know the countries in the Western European area was all set up for total war. The economies were ready to switch from peacetime economy to wartime economy, and this is, I think, this is the time of clear and honest talk. And because if we don't do that, then the population will just lose the trust in the politicians, and this is not what we need now.
Paul, France wants 50,000 volunteers by 2035 from a recruitment standpoint. And given your analysis of why some militaries attract volunteers and others don't, is that even remotely achievable, or is this all political theatre?
No, I don't think it's political theatre. I think the most important thing here is understanding the cultures. The cultures of the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries have always been for military service, and the Baltic countries, being former Soviet satellites, were used to that anyway. And that goes also for our Central European allies from Poland down through Bulgaria. They've always been used to that as well. France has had a long and distinguished record of its conscript soldiers. And I think the culture in the country is still there. And that's where it differs from, say, the United Kingdom. Because France has also deployed troops overseas. It used to regularly deploy troops to the Sahel and other parts of Africa. It has bases in places like Réunion and Nouvelle-Calédonie, Guadeloupe, and all of these places. So it's quite used to it. Britain, on the other hand, does well in recruiting a professional military when the army in particular has a war to go and fight, Iraq, Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, something like that. So it's about culture. And I think that President Macron and his generals are right. Just about everybody I talk to believes that we will be at war with Russia in some form or another. We are already in so many ways, but so that people in the community understand it. What worries me is that the British public are just not attuned for this.
That's what I wanted to ask you about, Paul, forgive me, but when UK generals talk about preparing the public for a quote-unquote new reality, do you think the British society is mentally prepared for that shift? And what does that new reality mean?
You're so right. It really isn't prepared for it. And we have a government in power now. It's been in power for about 15, 16 months, which prioritizes social needs over the defense of the nation. It's the first time a British government has ever put something other than the defense and well-being of the nation at the top of its agenda. We've just had a major budget financial statement here, which has increased social spending almost at the, I suppose, at the penalty of defense. So Britons, when they see that, when they read government information which says, we're going to pay more for you if you have more children and things like that, and know that defence is not being paid more, they think, well, there can't be a threat because otherwise Britain will be building up its armed forces. We've never had armed forces since probably over 100 years, as weak as they are at the moment. And that's the issue.
Jacques, Germany, when you look at the German approach, it's somewhat of a hybrid approach. Voluntary service backed by a possible lottery, right? It looks like a compromise. What do you make of that? Is that an adaptation to circumstances, or is it a sign that there's paralysis in Germany itself when it comes to this issue?
I think there's other signs showing that Germany is now becoming aware of the threat. Germany's mindset has completely changed in the last year or so. In the last couple of years, Germany was totally peace, dealing with Russia, etc. And now we see that, I don't know how it translates into the population, because I don't know the German population that well, but I can see the German authorities have decided to invest a huge amount of money. into the army. The budget, I think, is aimed to be 162 billion euros by 2029. And even this year, they're already going to spend twice as much as France, which used to have the biggest military budget in Western Europe. So, and this time, for two reasons. One, because they're aware that the danger is there, but also they're aware that the peace dividend is over and America is no longer there to guarantee their security, so that they have to stop. And it has a dual effect, actually. It's good for the economy because it increases investment in, we can see a company like Rheinmetall and going through the roof, many orders. So it's good for the economy, and it shows the awareness that Germany is now concerned. And it's music to the ears of the French, even though they don't want the German to be too powerful. It's music to the ear of the French, who all long been aware of the need to have a European strategic autonomy and to take the issue of defense and not to rely just on NATO and America to come to the rescue. So I don't know about the population is probably very reticent, but the German authorities and most parties are aware that you have to, now the peace dividend is over, and if you want to avoid war, if you want peace, you have to be able to prepare for war. So that's music to the ears of the French, who've always been strong advocates of European defense. And that's another big issue, because up to now relied in the problem with the Germans. We complained that when they spend on weapons, they buy American planes rather than European planes. So there's all question behind that of a European defense industry, but that's another story.
That is another story. Let's bring in Peter. Peter, look, some critics say that France and Germany are exaggerating the Russian threat for political effect. And from your NATO perspective, is Europe really preparing for a dangerous decade ahead, perhaps, or is this rhetoric just being inflated?
No, it's not inflated. As I mentioned before, after the second invasion of Ukraine in 2022, at the following Madrid summit, NATO changed the strategic concept. And this was a realization that we need the tripwire, the deterrence concept we had before was not enough to deter Russia from attacking European countries. So we needed actually to have more robust units able to defend the countries, and that's why the units and the small battle groups were enlarged into a brigade-size unit. And even in a country like Lithuania, yes, there'll be a brigade, but there's a German division behind this on a high readiness in Germany, ready to deploy to Lithuania. So for me, I was a young officer during the last years of the Cold War. This is I see a mirroring of the principle of how we defended Western Europe during the Cold War, how we plan to do it. So we will actually stack military units from northern Norway down to Bulgaria, Romania, shoulder to shoulder facing east. And some of these units will be in-place forces, others will be reaction forces that will come in and fill the holes and make it more robust. But the whole approach is just much more realistic. And so I think NATO knows this, and we need to, and many countries, especially as was mentioned before, some of the others, that the Eastern European countries, they are aware of this. For sure, the Baltics are aware of it. Finland has been aware of it for many, many years also when they were neutral. And the Nordic are moving very massive forward on this also. So I think there is a realization. We just need the deeper European countries to follow up here, and we need the politicians to paint this picture and the reality for the populations.
Okay, final question to all three of you gentlemen. Paul, I'll ask you first. The bottom line, in your opinion, does Europe genuinely need some form of conscription again, or is this the wrong answer?
each country in Europe needs to work out its own way that works with its own culture. The Nordics already have it, the Baltics already have it, Central Europeans already have it. Britain, being the furthest away from the bear, I suppose, needs to have a social reset so that people in the United Kingdom understand there is a threat of war. It is not just rhetoric. It's not just old people like me remembering the Cold War. There is a real and present danger.
Okay, Jacques Reland, what do you think? Does Europe need some form of conscription again?
Could do. Conscription in France is always seen as one way, preparing the country for defense. But in that sense, conscription is not valid with having 600,000 soldiers, because that's what each year that we have, new people, new 18 years old. It would not be efficient. People regret it, because it used to be a tool of social integration and where social classes mixed, etc. But otherwise, no. I think full conscription is not suited to our future imperatives. At least I hope we don't go towards a war like the First World War, but no, that's very unlikely. So no, full conscription, not necessary for military reasons.
Okay, Peter Nielsen.
Yeah, I think the frontline nations for sure need mobilization. They need to make their countries as indigestible as possible to Russia, and in order to do that, then they need the whole societies to turn into a total defense mode, where everybody has a role in defending the country. Finland is a super example on how that can be done. Israel is a more extreme example on this also. For the deeper Europe, I agree. We probably need to. The countries need to sort out themselves how they will do that. But I think it's important to note also that after a year of fighting in Ukraine, the Russian professional army ceased to exist. It was either killed or wounded, and then it turned into this professional, semi-professional conscription army, and probably something like that happened on the Ukrainian side also. So we don't plan to do a war of attrition. We really do not like that. We are more for the maneuverist approach. But you don't know how we're going to end in this, and we need to be able to sustain our casualties should this come. So, and the only way to do that is conscription.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Jacques Reland, Paul Beaver, and Peter Nielsen. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Join the conversation on X. Our handle is AJ Inside Story. From myself and the whole team here in Doha, thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now.